Today's topic for discussion is student support for learning skills development. Now, this is an important topic when we discuss about the training program for the academic counselors. Now, whenever you think about a training package of academic counselors, we consider this one as a very important one. So today we have taken up this topic for discussion. We will discuss various strategies what the academic counselors can take in a face-to-face situations and how to help the students to develop learning skills. We will take some examples, but before that we like to discuss some basic concepts, and we like to start with the very basic concept, that is the definition of skill. What is skill? Skill refers to a quality of performance which is developed through practice, training or experience. This is a definition given by Starks and Allard. Now, if we consider this definition, we find that the quality of performance, that means the skill is always related to performance, and it can be developed through practice, through training and through experience. This is a very simple definition, but we can have some kind of discussions on it. So I have Dr. A.S. Guha with me, and I request Dr. Guha to supplement on this definition.
When we think of skills, we also tend to think about a certain expertise which has been created by the person concerned. And when we talk about learning skills, we emphasize on not only the learning abilities of the student, but also the teaching qualities, because the learning-teaching transaction has an interface which cannot be separated. So skills, generally speaking, is some kind of handling of something as an expert, or being trained, as Dr. Biswas said, in something. Of course, we are now broadly speaking about skills, and we are using it in a very loose sense, but the context of today's discussion is learning skills.
Now, let us discuss about some of personal qualities which a person is required to fine-tuning the skill. Now, we know that there are persons who are semi-skilled persons, there are persons who are very skilled. So we will talk about some features what is needed for fine-tuning a particular skill. Say for example, motivation. The motivation is one important aspect. Without motivation, we cannot develop a skill. You take a student, you take any teacher, without motivation, he cannot develop any skill. So first factor is motivation. Second, we think that commitment is very important. Without the commitment, if a person is not committed to a particular task, he cannot develop skill. Then awareness about that particular task, what is required, what are the tasks he has to complete, he should know it very clearly. After that awareness comes perseverance, and then ability to manage setbacks. Sometimes it happens that when the person is under a training session, he is developing some skills, it may happen that he may not develop that particular skill for a particular time period, then he may be frustrated. There may be a setback, but the person must have the ability to manage that one. I think with these 5 points, and if Dr. Guha want to supplement, I'll request him to supplement.
Well, out of these 5 points, I think motivation, commitment, perseverance and ability to manage setbacks are very, very important. This is so because to develop mastery in a certain skill, one must have commitment towards what one is striving for. Secondly, one must have perseverance, hard work or diligence. Thirdly, one must have the kind of patience or the ability, let us say, to manage setbacks. What do we mean by this? We mean that a person should absorb shocks and should not, be feeling bad because of any failure. A setback should not disgruntle a person. A failure should not put off a person. So these four attributes are very, very important when it comes to skill development: motivation, commitment, perseverance, and ability to sort of absorb setbacks. As it is always said that one must fight to the very end. Failure is the pillar of success, to use a cliche. But these ingredients all constitute to the making of skills or leading to some kind of an expertise which a person can handle or deal with.
Right, Dr. Goh. Now let us proceed towards the ODL situation. Now, learning skills for ODL students. Now, we know that there is no absolute set of learning skills for ODL students, because some students, they follow some skills, other students also follow different skills, and it may be that all of them have done very good performance in their exams or assignments or whatever it may be. So there is no absolute set of learning skills. We cannot say that this is good, this is bad. Now, students generally use the methods what they have used earlier. In ODL situation, what happens, the students, they may directly come from conventional system, from schools, from colleges, universities. Now, whatever methods or strategies they have used in their conventional system, they may use the same strategy in ODL also. Now, what is the function of student support in developing learning skills? That is to encourage the students to reflect on their methods and to experiment on them. Now, why it is needed? Because it happens that in some cases, some students may develop some problem while tackling the materials, tackling the assignments, or managing time. They may develop some problems, and it happens actually. Practically, it is seen that the students develop some problems while tackling the assignments, tackling the content of a particular course, practicals, projects, and sometimes managing time, stress, etc. So there must be something, some strategy that students may follow. Now, the academic counselor, distance teacher, or the tutor, they may help the students in develop learning skills. We will discuss this process one by one. In general, we can say that the person's academic counselor's task is to encourage the students to reflect the methods what they are using, because they are already using some methods. They have used some methods in conventional system. Now reflect on that, and if it is not fruitful, then they can have some experiment with a new method. That is also can be done.
We are now coming to the situation where we are talking about not only skills but learning skills. In other words, we have created a situation where there is a teacher and the taught. We are all familiar with the traditional type of a classroom situation, the typical four walls of a classroom, and we know what goes on there and how the transaction between teacher and taught takes place. But what happens in an open and distance learning system is the crux here. In comparison to the traditional method of teaching and learning, we find that in distance and open learning, there is apparently a kind of a divide or a separation between the learner and the teacher. Number one. Number two, the learners straddle across various sections of the population. There could be young people, there could be elderly people, there could be working people, there could be housewives, etc., etc. So the learner profile is more varied and more complex than in a traditional system of education. And here the first point that Dr. Biswas talked about is important. No absolute set of learning skills. So can we prescribe a situation to the learner? Can we say that you learn in so and so way only? The answer is perhaps yes, and perhaps no, or perhaps both? Can we prescribe a set of absolute standards? In the conventional system of education, we have prescribed something that is absolute. We know that we have to listen to the person who is standing on the dais and speaking, even if we do not like to listen to what he is saying. But here the situation becomes different, because the learner gradually comes to realize that the very onus of learning is on himself. And it is not for nothing that in distance education we talk about a learner-centric situation. But students are students, and even if they are elderly people, they are used to earlier methods of teaching, as Dr. Biswas mentioned. And what is this earlier methods of teaching? They want lectures perhaps, they want notes, they want everything ready-made. But in distance education, we cannot give them on a platter everything that they want, because the situation is more complex. And hence, the need is to sharpen one's learning skills to the greatest extent possible, so that learning becomes very, very enjoyable and pleasurable. And what do we have for that? Let us find out more. One is, of course, student support.
Now let us discuss what are the steps one academic counselor can follow for giving training or learning skills development to the distance students. This is the task of the academic counselors. Now you know that in distance learning situations, there are various types of students. There may be motivated students, highly motivated students, there may be risk students, disadvantaged situations, the students may be in disadvantaged situations, there may be physically challenged students, various types of students may be there. Now, how to find out that the students have some kind of need for the learning skills development? Now, it is not some steps we can follow. We are not saying that these are the only steps, just for suggestions for the academic counselors. As a part of the training package, you can say that you follow this step. First, you try to find out whether there is any lack of learning skill amongst your students. Then, you may think about some areas. Say, for example, whether the students are facing problems in tackling the assignments, tackling the content, or whether the students are facing problem managing time. Now, you can divide it in various ways. When you are talking about the content, whether the students are facing problem in tackling with the content, that means you are talking about or taking it in terms of the cognitive aspect. And then if you talk about the management, time management, that means you are looking after the organizational aspect. Similarly, if the students suffer from some kind of anxiety, stress, then we can say that you are just taking into consideration the affective aspect. So you can take various aspects and you can find out what kind of problems the students have. So the first step, we can find out whether there is any lack of learning skill. Then step 2, what you can do, you can find out the process the students generally follow to solve the problem. This is very important. You will have to find out the process and how the students learn, how the students tackle their content, tackle assignments, tackling content, managing time, writing assignment. You can think about many more areas. So finding the process is the second step. We are talking about the general steps, then we will go to the specific steps. Now the third steps may be that you then clarify the situation, the present situation, what the students have expressed. You just try to clarify the situation, have a dialogue with the students, interaction with the students, and help the students to reflect on their methods. That means the students are already use the method, they have some experience, they have knowledge, so you tell them to reflect on that and think about the new situations and how they can utilize that situations, that method or strategy in the new situations. In the next step, if the students are not using a clear technique, if you find that they are not using a particular technique, then what you do, you suggest one method. This is very much important. Only clarifying the things or telling that no, this is not right or that is not good. You have to suggest some methods. So the academic counselors must know the methods also. What are the methods he can suggest? Then encourage them to experiment with a different method. If you see that one method doesn't work, then you think about another method and you can suggest some other methods. Now, on the basis of these 4 steps, I also like to listen from Dr. Guho in general. Then, before going to the specific step, we just have a discussion on these 4 steps, then we will discuss the specific steps.
After contextualizing the issue, now we switch perspectives. All this while we talked about the student. Now we are talking about the teacher, who is in the form of what we call in distance education an academic counselor. So what is expected of the academic counselor is certainly an important point of discussion. How will the academic counselor counsel his or her students? As I said earlier, somehow students tend to carry the past with them and want everything ready-made. But the academic counselor, unlike his counterpart in the conventional system of education, is not available every day. So he may be meeting the students at weekends. And the whole idea, prima facie, is that academic counseling is not so much lecturing, but it is counseling. Now, the issue of sharpening the learning skills of the student comes. What is the academic counselor going to do? Is he simply going to lecture? Is he going to take the help of audio visuals? Is he going to go in for multitasking and create different formats? All these depend on the level of the student and the student's aptitude. And more often than not, as Dr. Biswas rightly said, the student also is faced with a crisis of managing time, crisis of managing study and work, crisis of being moved out of one place to another place, crisis at home in managing home affairs, and so on. So in that situation, what do we expect the academic counselor to give? Step by step, we can perhaps enunciate, as Dr. Biswas has done. However, we must realize that what the learner needs is deep, empathetic concern. As one writer said, distance education is a continuity of concern. So the role of the academic counselor is pivotal because it does not end within the 4 walls of the classroom but goes beyond that.
Now let us move to a particular example or strategy or method. We can take learning skills for tackling course materials. As I told that the academic counselors will have to take up the individual problem and then he'll have to suggest something. Now how to do it? Now here we are going to suggest one activity what the academic counselors can do in the face-to-face situation, counseling situation. So when the students have come, you may have 20 students, 30 students, a group of students. You can take the students and what you can do with the students. You can ask the students some questions and you can tell them to make a note on the basis of those questions. Now some examples of questions are given here. Say for example, you can ask what do you do with the study material when you receive the same by post, because the students generally they receive the material by post and you want to know that after receiving what they do, because you want to know that what the methods or strategies they follow for reading. That's why you are asking question what you do. You will get different kinds of answers from the students. Some students will say, yes, I just keep the material on the table, I open it after 3 months. Some students will say that immediately I open the packet and I go through the materials. Some say that I see the color pictures and the quality of the material. various kinds of response we will get. And it actually happens, because from our personal experience we have asked so many students and we have seen the students are giving different kinds of responses. Now you ask the students and find out what are the responses. Then you ask, do you read immediately after getting the material? You ask the students, do you follow any specific method when you read the material? When the students will read the material, maybe after 1 month or 15 days or 10 days, whether they are following a particular method or there is no method when reading the material, say particular block, particular unit, you can ask. Then you can ask whether the students take notes, and if some students take notes, how they take note, what are the methods they follow. There are various methods of taking notes, so you can ask what are the methods they are following taking notes, whether the students are using some graphic design or whether they are using some charts, table diagrams for taking notes. And the IGNOU material, a very broad margin has been kept in the material, whether the students are using the margin for taking notes. That is also you can inquire from the students. And you can ask about the assignments, when the students do their assignments, when they start writing their assignments, whether they write the assignments just before the due date or they start writing the assignments immediately after they start reading the materials. You can find out the methods and strategies. Similarly, you can ask whether they follow any technique for assignment preparation, because there are various types of assignments, and what techniques the students follow, you can inquire from the students. You can ask the students how they revise the material, because revision is also a very important aspect. How they revise, do they follow a specific method or strategy, and how do the students summarize the material? That is also an important area. These are some examples, some questions we have given. I think from this you can get an idea that what are the specific steps you will have to follow to find out the strategies and methods the students use for different purposes, for tackling contents, for writing assignments, or for any other academic activity.
So once again our focus is on the learner, and Dr. Viswas has nicely done this transition from the academic counselor to the learner. Whole question is, the learner gets a package of study material and at times does not know what to do with it. More often than not, we have found students asking us, sir, I have got some material, now what am I going to do? The obvious answer is read it. But there could be inherent problems in assimilating the course material. First of all, the standards of the IGNOU course material are very, very high. And the language has a kind of sophistication, whether it is in English or in Hindi or in any other Indian language. It has that kind of sophistication which needs to be grasped readily, being at the same time lucid. Dr. Biswas talked about this problem of what is to be done with the study material and how the academic counselor is going to tackle that problem. Now, there are two issues here. One is that the teaching mechanism is inbuilt in the course material. In other words, the course material is perhaps written in such a way so as to give the impression that the teacher is talking to the student, though the teacher does not know who the students are and the students do not know who the teachers are. But the teaching mechanism is inbuilt in the study text. Yet, for all practical purposes, the students will feel that the academic counselor is our real teacher. So the academic counselor is a go-between, a facilitator and a mediator. Here the role of mediation becomes very, very important. How will he communicate what is written in the course material? Will he simply lecture? Will he focus on grey areas, difficult areas, and then try to highlight those points? Is he sure that the learners have read everything before coming to a tutoring session? We are not very sure about these, and our experiences often say that these do not happen. But we must be in a situation to prompt the academic counselor to go to a point where he is not so much lecturing or reading out, but identifying issues which are critical to the course material. If it is a course material on history, then identifying certain important historical issues or events. If it is literature, then talking about the problematics of a text and so on.
Now, when we are talking about that skills are related to content, we are talking about academic skills and study skills. Now, let me tell you two categories of what Kaplan has talked about when discussing about the study skills. This is also important. One is to know how to find information that is necessary to complete an assignment. Say, for example, the students have got an assignment on tsunami. Now, it is the responsibility of academic counselors to help the students from where the students will get the materials. The materials may be available in books, journals, may be available in a website. So he should provide the information to the learner, and he should tell the learner how to find out the information, find the information which is necessary for writing the assignments. This is one, because there are students, specifically the students who are residing in very remote areas or very disadvantaged areas. They may not find out the materials. They may not have that resources in their hand. Now, it is the responsibility of the teacher or the academic counselors to help the students to find out the materials. What should be the easiest way for the students to find out the material? It is the task of him. So, when we are talking about the study skills and academic skills, so this aspect we should not ignore. We should not think that only the techniques we will have to say, but this is also very important to find out the actual information, appropriate information, and how to find out, that is very important. Then we talk about the techniques. The learner should know the techniques to use the learning material. When you find out the material in the website, how to use the material. When the learner will find out the material in a book, how to use the material, how to read the book, and how to use the material in a way that will help the learner to develop his assignments properly. Now, here we can talk about a particular skill, technique that generally is used, and very well-known technique, that is reading technique, that is SQ4R technique. Basically, it is SQ3R technique developed by Robinson, but later it was modified, and now it is SQ4R technique. Now, SQ4R technique, SQ4R stands for survey, S means survey, and Q stands for question, and 4R stands for read, recite, review, and reflect. I think the academic counselors should know about some techniques, as I told earlier, just to not to say that this is not the right technique. He should say that. But what is right and what is wrong, that is also very difficult to say, because some techniques are useful for some reading materials, for some subjects and disciplines. Some techniques may be useful for other disciplines or other materials. So one technique that is in general that can be used for any course material, humanities, science, or any course material, that we can say that is very well-known technique, that is SQ3R modified. After modification, it has been SQ4R. Now, very briefly, let me talk about this one. When the learner receives the material, you suggest your learner to survey the material, the whole material, starting from the cover page to the end. How many blocks are there? What are the title of the blocks? Then how many units are there in a block? What are the titles of the unit? This kind of information they can collect with a quick survey. Then when they will take up a particular unit, there also they can survey the material. How to survey? See the title of the unit, see the introduction, see the objectives, then ask them to see the charts and diagrams, self-assessment questions, glossaries, very quick survey. Then after seeing that, the questions may come learner's mind. It should come. What is that what kind of material is it? Is it relevant to is there any relevancy what I am searching for? Is it relevant to me at this moment, and whether it will serve my purpose? These kind of questions will come to mind, and the learner will try to relate his experience, whatever he knows, his information, whatever he gathered earlier, with the new information, and this he will try to relate it with the questioning, yes, it is important or it is not. Then when the learner starts reading the material, then he should read very slowly, because due to time factor I am telling you very briefly the process. The first reading should be very slow reading, not very fast reading, and the first reading the learner will never take the notes or make any notes. Just he will go through the material, just read it very slowly, and whenever the learner wants to make some notes, then you suggest that he take notes after second reading. Then say for example the learner has gone through a particular section or particular important concept, then there is a need to recite that one, or you can say the recall the material. In this way the learner will proceed. He will proceed, complete one section, then another section, he will attend the SAQs, and then he will review the material after completion of the particular unit. And there is another important area to talk about, that is the reflection. Again the learner will reflect what he has learned, what he already knew, and what he has learned in this particular unit or the particular lesson. That is very much needed. The reflection is very much needed. So these are the techniques you can suggest to learners do it, and if the learners follow for any discipline, it may benefit, may help the learner to perform well.
Now talk about a situation where there is understanding, there is retention, and there is comprehension, let us say. Understanding, retention, and overall comprehension. And for this Dr. Biswas has suggested a technique. This technique may or may not be used by everyone, but a lot will depend on the kind of aptitude the learner has for a particular program on offer or a particular subject. It is true that we have to gather a lot of information, but the question is, how do we transfer that information into what we call knowledge? Today we often talk about a knowledge-based society. Knowledge is not necessarily a sum total or a conglomerate of information. Knowledge is something more than that. There is no dearth of information today, and this is one issue which I would like to talk about as well. In addition to the study material, the learner today has access to so much information on the internet, apart from library facilities. So there is no doubt of information. But how do we put all this information together and transform that into what we call yes,
shown nationally and internationally. This is also part of a national and an international civil religion. As globalization enters into its first decade, I suppose, we find that civil religion also is being spread outwards, and there are indications that there could be a global civil religion at some particular point of time, though the other religions would be different. And as we pointed out,
and doing well enough, that goes to the credit of the study material or what is written. So it depends on the type of our technique. In addition to that technique, he or she must supplement it with the kind of technology or media